They say the dead keep their secrets better than the living, but what happens when a corpse becomes the keeper of a kingdom's lie? Imagine standing inside Westminster Abbey, the air cold, silent, beneath your feet lies a coffin sealed not just in lead, but in deception. Inside it sleeps a queen whose body was never meant to be seen again. The Virgin Queen, Elizabeth Tudor. Her death was written as serene, regal, divine. But the truth? It was monstrous. They said she refused to lie down for days. That her eyes stayed open, staring at something, or someone, no one else could see. The court whispered she'd gone mad. But madness doesn't explain why her body began to rot while she was still breathing. Why the stench of decay filled Richmond Palace weeks before her final breath. Servants scrubbed the floors with rosemary, burned incense until the air was thick and choking. Still, the smell seeped through the walls, something dead living among the living. Her face, once the mask of royal beauty, was hidden under layers of white paste. So thick it cracked when she moved. They said it was vanity. But the truth buried under that mask wasn't vanity, it was horror. Her skin was blackening, peeling, dying before she did. A sickness she carried for decades, hidden behind portraits and poetry. When she finally died, her body was sealed so quickly, her doctors forbidden to speak. The cause of death, classified. The post-mortem, never done. Why? Because what they found beneath the mask could have destroyed the myth that built the British Empire. A myth of purity, divinity, untouched power. The Virgin Queen, virgin only in name. The woman who defied marriage, who ruled alone, who called herself married to England. But England was not her husband. England was her prison, her disguise, her secret sin. They buried her fast. The Archbishop spoke of her soul ascending to heaven, but the servants who washed her body whispered of marks, deep scars along her torso. Signs of wounds never healed. Wounds that shouldn't exist. This wasn't the death of a saint. It was the silencing of a secret. A secret that began long before her crown, long before her throne, in a tower, in the screams of her mother, and in the darkness of a royal childhood built on blood. And tonight, you'll see why the Virgin Queen never married, because the truth of her body, her mind, and her bloodline, was never meant to survive. Picture a 3-year-old girl, standing behind a cold stone wall, listening to the crowd roar outside. She doesn't understand why the world sounds so alive when her mother is about to die. Then silence. Then one final thud, the sound of steel meeting flesh. The sound that will haunt her forever. That girl was Elizabeth. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, had been executed by her father, Henry VIII, the same man who once called Anne the Jewel of England. That's the first truth they never teach you. Elizabeth didn't just inherit a crown, she inherited trauma forged in blood. From that day on, she was not a daughter of royalty, she was a survivor in a kingdom that fed on women's deaths. She learned early that love was just another execution waiting to happen. Her father married 6 times, and Elizabeth watched as each queen either bled, burned, or vanished. She was surrounded by ghosts. Ghosts that whispered lessons sharper than any tutor could offer: don't love. Don't trust. Don't need anyone. You see, Elizabeth's education wasn't just Latin and philosophy, it was fear, disguised as discipline. She learned that a woman's power is a threat, and a man's desire is a weapon. She watched the court play its games, smiling faces masking blades. And she smiled too, because a child who doesn't smile in a palace like that, doesn't live long. When she was declared illegitimate, stripped of her title, and exiled from court, she didn't cry. She memorized faces, names, allegiances. Every insult became a note in her silent ledger. Even then, she was calculating. Not out of greed, but survival. The Virgin Queen wasn't born from chastity. She was built from fear, engineered by trauma. They tell us she chose not to marry because she was independent. But independence was never her choice, it was her cage. Every man who came close to her reminded her of what power had done to her mother. Of what her father had done to every woman he ever touched. And yet, there's another rumor. A darker one. That after Anne Boleyn's execution, Henry's guilt twisted into obsession. He couldn't love, but he couldn't stop creating versions of Anne, through portraits, through mistresses, through his own child. The court whispered that Elizabeth's resemblance to her mother haunted him. That he couldn't look at her without seeing what he'd destroyed. Some said that obsession turned into something unspeakable. That the reason Elizabeth's later years were marked by sickness, fear, and strange scars wasn't punishment from God, it was something much worse. And when you hear what they found on her body after death, you'll understand why they sealed her coffin so fast. By the time Elizabeth took the throne, England was a corpse dressed in gold. The kingdom was bankrupt, divided, and rotting from within, just like the woman who would rule it. But she understood something no king before her ever did: people don't want truth. They want theater. And she gave them a performance so perfect it rewrote history. She turned her trauma into armor, her fear into ritual. Every morning, she was painted white, lead mixed with vinegar, layered so thick it erased the woman beneath. They called it beauty. But the truth was that her skin had begun to decay years earlier. Her body rejected her own reflection. The mask of youth, they said. No. It was the mask of survival. The mask that kept the monster beneath from being seen. Her courtiers believed she was immortal. Men knelt before her, trembling, convinced she was half divine. But those who served close enough to touch her knew the truth. They whispered that her body bled without wounds, that her teeth blackened from the poison she wore daily, that she screamed in her sleep, always the same words, "Don't take my head." And yet, she ruled like no one else. She bent nations to her will. Spain fell. The Armada burned. Her enemies trembled not because she was beautiful, but because she was terrifying. The Virgin Queen wasn't a symbol of purity. She was a symbol of control. She weaponized her image, turned chastity into domination. Every suitor was a pawn, every rumor, a tool. She never gave love, because love was how you died. But here's what the history books omit: the Queen's chambers were guarded not just by soldiers, but by physicians, men sworn to secrecy. They monitored her day and night. They burned her sheets. They destroyed her clothing. Why? Because her body had begun to produce something unnatural. A secretion, black, tar-like, with a smell like metal and decay. Some called it infection. Others called it a curse. Her confessor wrote in a coded letter that Elizabeth bore the mark of the unclean. That her refusal to marry was not pride, but necessity. Because anyone who shared her bed would not survive her. And yet, deep in her private chambers, she kept a single object locked in a chest beside her bed, a locket containing a miniature portrait. Not of any man she ruled with, not of any noble or ally. But of her father. Henry VIII. They said she spoke to it at night. Whispered apologies. Whispers that turned into sobs. And then, silence. But the most disturbing detail? When her coffin was opened centuries later, something was missing. Her jawbone. Gone. Removed before burial. The question is, why? If you're still here, type this phrase in the comments twice: "I see through the mask." Write it twice to lock this truth inside you, because once you see the mask for what it is, you can never unsee it. 2 days after Elizabeth's death, the palace corridors reeked of something far worse than perfume could hide. The royal surgeons begged permission to perform an autopsy, a request that was instantly denied by her council. But one of them, Dr. John Dee's apprentice, left behind a cryptic note. The Queen's body, he wrote, was not of woman nor of man, but something between. A vessel shaped by sin, held together by will. That note vanished after his mysterious disappearance. But fragments survived, in whispers, in coded letters, in diaries of those who attended her final hours. They speak of an unholy discovery. When her body was washed, her attendants found deep incisions, healed long ago, running along her abdomen and chest. Not wounds from disease, but deliberate cuts. Old, surgical. And yet, the instruments capable of such precision didn't exist in Tudor England. Some said she was experimented on as a child, after her imprisonment in the Tower. That secret physicians, working under Henry's orders, performed rituals disguised as medical trials. Others claimed she bore the mark of ancient practices brought from the continent, rituals designed to control fertility, to reshape bloodlines, to create rulers not born but built. A hybrid of power and pain. The royal council panicked. They sealed her body in lead to stop decomposition, at least, that's what the records say. But witnesses outside Richmond swore that the coffin hissed as it was closed. That smoke rose from the seams. That the archbishop ordered prayers not for her soul, but for protection. And then came the cover-up. The portraits painted after her death were idealized, faces reconstructed, scars erased, eyes softened. The famous rainbow portrait wasn't a celebration, it was a warning. Look closely. The serpent on her sleeve. The eyes and ears embroidered into her gown. The message was clear: I see all. I hear all. I control all. She had become the system itself, the eternal observer. This is how control works. They hide corruption behind divinity. They turn trauma into theater. And they tell you purity is power, while feeding you lies that keep your eyes down and your questions quiet. The Virgin Queen was not a saint. She was a construct, a weapon of image warfare. And when she died, they didn't just bury a woman. They buried the last witness to how deep the manipulation ran. Because the truth is this: Elizabeth didn't rule England. The same hands that killed her mother ruled through her. And those hands never left the throne. After her burial, the official story froze in time. Elizabeth, the glorious Virgin Queen, the savior of England. But power doesn't die, it mutates. What came after her wasn't freedom. It was succession by design. Because the men who wrote her legend also wrote her replacement. James I didn't just inherit her crown, he inherited her silence. Every document that hinted at the Queen's condition was sealed under royal decree. Those records remain locked today, hidden in the British Royal Archives under special restriction. For centuries later, the seal still hasn't been broken. Ask why. The monarchy is a machine, and Elizabeth was its first perfect prototype, an image so powerful it convinced millions to love their own submission. The empire that followed learned from her psychology. They understood that if you make the ruler appear untouchable, divine, eternal, then obedience becomes worship. It was the birth of modern control systems, cloaked in silk and ceremony. But the real horror isn't that she was manipulated. It's that her blood still moves through those who claim her name. Not biologically, ideologically. The worship of image. The addiction to power. The obsession with control through purity. Every government since has used her blueprint, a leader sanctified by myth, sanitized of humanity, and surrounded by walls of secrecy. You think you live in a democracy, free from thrones and crowns? Look closer. Every politician wears the same mask. Every corporation crafts the same illusion. Every institution polishes its public face while hiding decay underneath. The system Elizabeth embodied never ended, it simply changed costumes. And the bloodline of shadows didn't vanish with her. It adapted. Through secret societies born in the ashes of her court. Through rituals whispered in Latin beneath Westminster. Through oaths sworn not to truth, but to continuity. Continuity of control. Because power doesn't care who wears the crown, it only cares that someone does. The illusion must never break. And so, generation after generation, the Virgin Queen's ghost remains, reborn in presidents, prime ministers, media moguls, and monarchs who smile while you kneel. The woman who could not die, could not love, and could not reveal her true face, became the eternal archetype of power itself. And the reason she never married? Because her union was already complete. She was married to the machine. To the ancient system that still runs this world. You've followed the trail through centuries of silence. You've seen the masks, the rituals, the bloodline of shadows. But here's the final truth, the one that no historian, no scholar, no monarch dares to speak. Elizabeth's virginity was not a vow. It was a curse. A curse sealed into the monarchy itself, one that fed on fear, secrecy, and the sacrifice of truth. Every ruler that came after her has carried a piece of that curse, whether they knew it or not. Because the Virgin Queen wasn't a symbol of purity. She was the embodiment of controlled perception. Her entire reign was an experiment in mass hypnosis, a test of how long a lie could live if it was crowned in gold. And it worked. For over 400 years, the people adored her. They built statues. They named an entire era after her. They turned her trauma into legend, her silence into grace, her loneliness into virtue. That is how power survives, by rewriting its own crimes as miracles. But when you strip away the paintings, the hymns, the gilded words, what remains is a woman mutilated by her own image. They say her ghost still walks the halls of Richmond, her face pale, her eyes hollow, whispering to no one. Not of lost love or kingdom undone, but of regret. Because even in death, she knew what her rule had unleashed, a world where appearance replaced truth, where obedience replaced thought, where power became the only god left to worship. Look around you. The system she built is still here, only now, it's digital. The throne has become the screen. The crown is the algorithm. The courtiers are the voices that shape what you see, think, and feel. You are not a subject of a queen, but a citizen of illusion. Her methods are everywhere: branding, censorship, idolization, silence. We still live under her shadow, worshipping the same crown of lies. But now you've seen through it. The truth burns, doesn't it? Because once you see how control hides behind beauty, how power disguises itself as virtue, you can never unsee it. That's the cost of awakening. If you've made it this far, you are not the same person who began. You've crossed the threshold. Type it again in the comments: I see through the mask. Twice. Because repetition isn't for the algorithm, it's for your rebirth. You were never meant to hear this story. But now that you have, remember this: history doesn't repeat itself. It reincarnates. And the Virgin Queen never truly died.